Hello, this is Christopher Zampona coming from Washington, D.C., having a podcast related to sexual crimes in the District of Columbia. My office is located at 1775 I Street. I have one of my associates, Ellie Hearn, conducting this podcast with me. So enjoy the back and forth related to uh, sex, consent, and the law. Thank you.
Okay, so what can you explain your background and why this conversation is important both legally and ethically?
Sure. Yeah. As I said, I have a law office in D.C. Uh, I went to Notre Dame undergrad law school, was a prosecutor in New York, have recently focused on crimes related to police officers, but other crimes. And as far as their activities go, there are cases in which sometimes police have had sexual encounters, we'll say, with some of the people they pull over, and some are consensual. They're not supposed to happen, but they have happened. So that's kind of the focus. We'll do a little bit of it today, and in general.
Okay. So what is sexual assault? The legal definition and how it's different from sexual abuse or sexual battery.
Yeah. So depending on as you know, we're in an interesting location with Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. So the three jurisdictions have different definitions. Uh, Assault is related more to assault and battery, so there has to be, generally speaking, a physical contact. Uh, the other definite, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, they don't define all of them. Um, and there is, of course, the federal jurisdiction that overlays all of them, but they tend to use. There is some federal crimes related to this directly, but uh, they tend to use the state crimes for the actual um, sexual assault charges.
And what are some common factors in sexual assault?
So normally there is a non-consensual situation is usually the main one. A power differential can be also part of it, and of course some kind of physical contact, although it's not necessary, but that is also a piece, probably generally speaking.
So another important topic that you just brought up is consent. Could you talk about what consent is and what it isn't?
Yeah, so again, it's jurisdictionally specific to how the law is developed, but obviously saying yes as opposed to no is one general way to explain it, but it's got more complicated than just that simple of an answer. There is, um, even yes could mean no in certain situations if it's not continually consented to, for instance. Um, and then there can be a yes in situations where it doesn't matter if there's a yes because there's a strict liability standard of some type of contact. For instance, like a minor, even though there's consent, there still would be an assault.
And what are some things that there might be a misunderstanding that it is consent, but it's really not?
Yeah, I think I started to touch upon it. For instance, if there was someone of a higher level of power over the other person, someone may, under duress, consent, so to speak, but that would not be consent, even if that were the case. So that's a general way to put it. That can relate to many different situations, like a teacher and a student, a minor, I guess I just said, and an adult, things like of that nature. Yeah.
So another topic is statutory rape and the age of consent. Could you talk about the age of consent in DC, Maryland, and Virginia?
Yeah, I believe the specifics. Let's see. The I think usually is 18. Um, However, there's sometimes a different age differential that can come into play with that statutory rape charge. So, depending on the jurisdiction, and I'd have to look myself to know, and I have some of the statutes here, but in other words, if there's a larger age differential, it's a rape. When it gets closer, it's not. Um, and there are specifics to that depending on D.C., Maryland, or Virginia.
And so would those be a strict liability crime?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I didn't add to that. So there is a standard when you, because basically the law is saying that the person cannot consent even if they consented. So if they're underage, it doesn't matter if they say yes. It's strict liability. Yeah.
Um, so with respect to capacity to consent, who is not in a position legally to consent?
Yeah, so capacity complies to even more than just minors. It can apply to someone who is disabled and may not have, even if they're older. They, for instance, someone maybe that's suffering from Down syndrome or something may not be able to consent, for instance, or have the capacity to consent if you're under the influence of a drug, for instance, too. That would also change your capacity. So even if you are of the right age, if someone were to assault somebody else and they were under the influence of something, you name the drug, there's so many, then that would be also non-consensual.
Okay. And we talked about strict liability briefly just a little bit ago, and what that means for like a minor who maybe thinks they're consenting, but it doesn't count as consent. How does that work for the perpetrator? What does their intent mean?
Uh, yeah, they have to know. I mean, I guess the trick, the part that would be difficult if someone lied about their age, but it's still not really going to get them off the hook. Usually, they have you are meaning the perpetrator is considered to have to know the age, so there really isn't any excuse. So you have to be careful in those situations if that's something that you're um, a situation you might be in. And the other thing I didn't say earlier, which is consent can be withdrawn at any time too. So even if there is consent given, and as I looked, there is actually even a Virginia case, Connolly v. Commonwealth, for instance, as an example, where the Commonwealth of Virginia established the fact that it's not like yes forever. It's yes until someone says no, and then it's no. You know. Sorry, go ahead.
Um, so could you talk about prostitution and solicitation laws in DC, Maryland, and Virginia?
I believe the different jurisdictions hold, they call them, they will have different names for them, but they still have similar effects. So, as we know, that's pretty basically sex for money. So, there isn't really, there's a consent, but it's a financial consent. So, using finances to consent to it. And normally it's not always prosecuted, but normally, but they do prosecute it for the victim meaning um, the prostitute themselves or the worker. They will not prosecute him or her. They prosecute the person soliciting. So, but each one has a different standard, and I'm not. You could call the office to get the exact definitions, but a lot of it's similar. But in generally speaking, it's about payment for for this. Thanks.
So could you also talk about sex trafficking and exploitation, and how that works with consent and legal definitions.
Yeah, so depending on, we have instances a lot of, unfortunately, people coming from other countries that are kept in this country against their will and trafficked, meaning sold. So they're not even, in a sense of prostitution. They're not even deciding to become if there is, such a thing, but they're being forced to um, participate, and the people that are involved in that process get paid. So that is a big problem, and it happens everywhere, unfortunately. And there are federal crimes that address this probably even better than the other areas, because a lot of the federal crimes relate to transportation across state lines. So in this case, there would always be usually trafficking and moving people across state lines. So yeah, yeah.
How do these laws apply to technology? So could you explain like the legality of sexting, nudes, and social media?
Yeah, so again, there's a consent factor to this to some degree. I mean, there is, there are specific federal laws, for instance, that relate to child pornography. So even if the child were to put it up there, if the person looks at it, it's still illegal. It's not. There isn't a consent component to it. Uh, yeah, so that's a strict liability situation online. And of course, if it's not a child, if you reproduce things, unfortunately, people do send pictures consensually of themselves to others, but it's not meant to be for the public. So there could be ramifications if those were published later. There's all sorts of laws about that. Civil suits come to mind. Um, yeah.
So do you have um, any advice in terms of what to do and what not to do, or just um, if you're being accused of sexual assault or one of these crimes, things to do in that situation?
Well, I would say first call a law office, if you're actually already accused. If you think you're under investigation, kind of the same thing. I've had people come to me when they've had a situation where they think something might happen. And, ethically, a law office can't help someone avoid a future crime. So you can talk to them about a past crime, and you can't be divulging it to the public. However, if it's something in the future, the lawyer can tell the authorities about it. So I would say make sure you have, if there is a relationship with someone, make sure you have proof of consent of the age, and that could be with, I guess, video evidence, I suppose. But you got to be careful; you can't publish video evidence, as we just said, or make sure you see someone's driver's license, I guess, at some point if you want to really be safe. Um, I think it's important to use common sense too. Um, the consent laws related to intoxication relate both ways. So if the quote perpetrator is intoxicated too, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get out of a bad situation either. So if you are intoxicated or under the influence, don't do it. Don't do it, and whatever you might think you're doing, because that would get you into trouble probably as well, or could. So avoid bad situations. So I'm not saying to be a teetotaler, but I think a friend of mine said once, nothing good ever happens after 10 o'clock at night. So I mean, maybe take that to heart a little bit. Uh, so yeah. So and yeah, keep our numbers 202-223-6635. So oops, I didn't see my head in there. So now it's back in. Um, so you call our office if you have a question.
Um, and do you have any additional resources or prevention tips?
Uh, Well, as I said, we've done some good research on this because I had a case about a police officer, unfortunately, who was convicted of having sex in custody, and we've done lots of research on the issue. We didn't represent him in that matter. We represented him in a federal case, and so our law office is experienced in this kind of arena because it is very tricky, and depending on who you are, there can be uh, there's different laws that would apply to you. So yeah, we have resources. We've done it, but we'd have to look. Every case is different. So
Okay. Do you have any closing remarks?
yeah, I would just say, we as I said, we have a lot of good resources, a lot of good employees in our office that will help you. Everything is confidential if you call us, and uh, and that's about it. You can find the contact information online. Thanks so much.